This message was given at the Building Strong Families Conference held in Dallas, Texas, March 20th through the 22nd of 2000. This conference was sponsored by the Council on Biblical Manhood and Womanhood and Family Life Ministries. Following the message, there will be information on how to order additional materials on building a strong family.
Thank you very much. I hope everybody has your yellow or whatever color the sheets are. This is going to be like a machine gun. I'm going to give you stuff because right up front, I've never given this seminar ever before, but I've thought about it for years. And so when they asked me to speak, first of all, I was flabbergasted that here is an entire conference on marriage, and they wanted me to do something on singles. I'm the only one in the whole crew here that does anything on singles. I had a session before called Helping Single Adults Handle Moral Failure, and then this one, Singles in Your Ministry, Why They Stay and Why They Stray. So I feel very honored that they would ask me to do this. Secondly, as I began to think about it, here I am going to be talking to Christian leaders about something I have wanted for years to talk to Christian leaders about. So I'm not going to give all my nice little stories and all the fluff and all the other kind of things. I'm just going to get down to the stuff that I think is very significant in the lives of millions of people, and they're single adults. So we're going to go through the notes, and I have given you only a little blank line, so you don't have to write the whole thing out. All I got to do is be awake and fill in the blank line. It's very simple. Now, on my introduction, we'll start right there, okay? In the church, which is what we're talking about, many single adults feel like the church is anti-single. I can't tell you the number of people that I talk to personally. I speak to conferences throughout America. We're now going to Canada, Russia, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong. God's opening up doors internationally, because if you think the problems are bad for singles in America, it's far worse in these other countries where marriages, while I was in Russia, 80% of all marriages end in divorce. So I think we have it bad here. But anyway, many of them feel like the church is either neglecting them or somehow or other just is not interested. And I'm going to start from that premise. I'm going to start with Singles in Your Ministry, Why They Stray. I'll talk about the negative first. I always love to end on the positive, so we're going to do that. Okay? So the first section I want to look at, number one, is seeing the invisible mission field. Seeing the invisible mission field. Single adults comprise 40.3% of the adult population in America. Now, the definition of adult is 18 and above. Obviously, you have college students in that range. So college students, according to the census, they're considered single. But if you just lop off the singles, like up to age 22, you still have somewhere around 65 million single adults in our country today. Many of your major metropolitan areas are loaded with singles. For example, Manhattan, I have been told, is 80% single. Dallas, Texas, I've been told is 67% single. You go to most major communities, metropolitan communities, and you'll find a huge number of singles, but they're invisible. The reason is they look like everybody else. There's no distinguishing feature. They'll sit out in your boardroom of your business. They'll be your salesmen. They'll be your teachers. They'll be your construction workers. They'll be the unemployed. They cover every economic strata you can imagine. Everything from presidents and CEO of major corporations all the way down to the unemployed and all in between. Not only that, but I have been reading some interesting statistics, and this is from the 1997 census. What it says is that 53% of all unchurched adults are single. Not the 1997 census, but the Barna report said that, and a quote from Barna. They surveyed 1,150 adults. They said single adults were markedly different than married adults. Well, that's a no-brainer. But what happens in our churches is that we have a mindset of marriage, which I'm not against, but I'm just telling you the way it is, how singles think. It's a mindset of marriage, and they try to fit the singles into the marriage paradigm. And therein lies the problem. It's like taking a high school ministry and putting it into college. It is a total different animal, and high school ministries among college students will never fly. It's a different breed of cat. So it's the invisible mission field. Actually, businesses are very aware of singles. If you look at the advertising on television, you will find a majority of the ads on TV are really geared to single people. Beer, for example. Do you ever see a couple quietly drinking a beer somewhere in the ad? Never. It is always a bunch of single people. I have looked for rings on their finger. You cannot find ring on a finger in a beer commercial. But it's always a big party, except when you have frogs. But it's always a big party, and lots of fun, because what they're trying to do is build an image that beer brings people together and have a lot of fun. And look at your car ads. Over and over again, you find that they're appealing to singular people. Like, for instance, the famous Elsbiel ad, "This is not my daddy's car." Just kind of the things. So it's what I call the silent minority, because single adults usually are not the squeaky wheel. The squeaky wheel are the married people. Well, where's something for my kids? Where's something for my teenager? How come this program isn't like this? It's the married people that are all squeaking. What single adults do is they vote with their feet. They never show up. They go there a couple of weeks or a month. They figure it's not for me. I'm out of here. So they're the silent minority. So they're not going to get the people pounding the door at the budget meeting and say, "We got to have more for singles." They're not the people that are going to come and harangue you because there's nothing for them somewhere. They just don't ever show up. And so it's a catch-22. A lot of churches say, well, the singles are flaky and they never show up. And if they do show up, they never stay. And the singles say, yeah, but when we do come, there's nothing for us. And so it's just one of those vicious cycles. Look, they don't stay. Yeah, but they don't have anything for me. And it's just constantly like that. And I really believe that we are seeing a tremendous shift in America in the social area. The fastest growing household type, according to the 1997 census, is a single adult household. And a subset is that. The fastest progressing group is single fathers. And in fact, some of the statistics I've read say this, that over 50% of all children born today, by the time they're 18, will live in a single-parent home at some time in their life, which means millions will go through divorce. And the divorce, I hear parents all the time. I have a single adult ministry. I work with churches around America, and I have singles all the time. Well, the kids are okay. I hear that all the time. I'm about ready to puke. Sorry, it's on the tape. But I am. They don't understand. Because they're in their own world. Oh, yeah, it's all right for us. They don't know what they're doing to the kids. The kids bury it inside. Depends on what age they are. If they're young, they feel like mom and dad split up because of me. It's very guilt-ridden. But if they're in a teenage world, they just say, oh, that's the way mom and dad is, forget about them, and they're in their own thing. But the problem is, it all hits the surface when they start trying to have a relationship themselves. The breakup, they've seen maybe their relatives or somebody close break up to them. And I would say the number one emotion that I am coming across with single adults is fear. They're afraid of intimacy. They're afraid of commitment. They're afraid of one-on-one, many of these, because they don't know what to do. I have people all the time that have gone through a divorce, and they're 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. They've been married for 10, 15, 20 years. All of a sudden now, They're put back into a category where they're 50 years old, but they have to act like a teenager. Because now they got to find somebody, and they've been out of the dating world for so long, they do not know what to do. And no one is helping them or even having a discussion about some of these issues. So it's what I call the invisible mission field. Now, my second major point, the top 10 reasons why singles are turned off by the church. Like I said, it's negative, and I'm going to be negative, so please bear with me. I will end up on the positive. But I want to talk about the mindset of a single, because unless you know the mindset of a single, it's going to be very hard to work with them. Just like any other group. Unless you know the mindset of a college student, very hard to work with them. So I decided to put this together. Now, this has not been a survey, the top 10 reasons. These are just the things that I have picked up as I have gone all over the place. And I have talked to every kind of group you can imagine. I think number 10. I'm not saying this is in order of importance. I'm just saying there are 10. Number 10, frivolous jokes degrade single life. Frivolous jokes degrade single life. Oh, there are a lot of them, and you'd be amazed. Grandparents, parents, pastors, they get these jokes all the time. I was single until I was 42 years old. I was assistant pastor in my middle 30s in a church. And I got all this stuff. Oh, here are some of the questions, kind of like in joking manner. Things like, hey, you afraid to take responsibility of a mate? Here I am running a whole church. And they tell me I'm afraid to take responsibility. Oh, the one that comes out a lot, are you too picky? Are you picky? In other words, if you're less picky and lower your standards, then you'll get somebody. Oh, another one is this. You're not getting any younger, you know. Which means, what's an old bag like you telling me what I'm supposed to do? You know, I mean, isn't it amazing to me? It's often the people who have the worst marriages that are trying to get you married off. I know a very good friend of mine that she's in her 40s now. And she says, why should I get married? I see all the problems around me. I see devastated lives. Why should I do what they're doing? So singles are very skeptical. We're going to get into that in just a minute. But a lot of these jokes, they go a lot deep. I heard people tell me all kinds of, the big one was, what are you waiting for? Like, I better get up and get going. Well, I keep thinking, well, isn't there a sovereign God around here somewhere? Oh, people would say to me, oh, they give what I call romantic testimonies. Oh, when I just gave everything over to God, then 6 months later, I found the right one. Here I was 40 years old. I've been in the ministry over 20 years. And there's something I had not given up to God that some other 18-year-old had found to give up to God. All the formulas that people give, they're just human ideas. And sometimes they really hurt. I'll give you just one instance. I don't want to belabor this, but after I left my church, I still stayed in the city. I started to speak on universities throughout America, and I'd come home every once in a while. And this elderly gentleman who was on my elder board knew me real well. There was a woman, a good friend of mine. She was single, and I was single, but she was just passing through town. Good friend of mine that I knew for many years on Campus Crusade staff. And so she stayed with some friends. And I said, look, while you're in town, we just kind of chatted for a while. And I said, let's go to church together. So we're walking down the aisle, and we're getting, the usher was going to show us to our seat, and it was a huge auditorium, and it was getting silent. The organ's playing real low, and everybody's kind of quiet. We get down to probably about the third row, and he's going to show us a seat. So he stands there, and he gives her a bulletin, and she starts going in, and he hands me a bulletin out loud. I mean, you could hear me hear him three-fourths of the church. Hey, when are you going to marry her? I mean, I wanted to die. First of all, I wanted to punch his lights out. I wanted to die. I mean, if I was a typical single, do you think I ever want to go back? No way. So, in joking, people are turned off. I mean, they degrade single life and they elevate married life. And I don't think they understand that. I just think they want to have a joke or something. I don't think they really want to do that. But when you hear it often enough, you get to the place where, look, I don't need this for my life. Number 9 is church leadership is all married, with very little understanding of single adult needs. You don't have singles on typical churches. You don't have single pastors. You don't have single elders. It says they're right in the Bible. Husband and one wife. But you know what? If you carry that to logical conclusion, then the Apostle Paul was not qualified to be an elder. Plus, Timothy is pretty good indicator. Timothy himself was single. Because Paul talked about his mother and his grandmother, I think it was, but never a wife. Isn't that interesting? I can give you a lot of stories about single. I was assistant pastor. When I was finished being assistant pastor for 4 years, I wanted to be a senior pastor. I had 15 years of experience in the ministry. I had 2 master's degrees at that point. And my service, I had 1 service a week. The senior pastor had 2. He was tired of doing 3, so he gave me 1. And my service had gotten so big that they moved my whole service out of the church and put it into a middle school auditorium down the street. So my service was bigger than the other 2 services in the regular church. And the elders, now 1 elder stayed with me and tried to help this rabble-rousing kid, you know. But I was so glad. It was just so great because the senior pastor was not threatened. I mean, he could have been threatened like crazy. But I thank God to the day I die, because this man just kept urging me to keep going and growing, and boy, it just boomed. And I decided after 4 years I'd like to be a senior pastor. Well, I sent my resume back to my seminary, and really churches all around. Do you know what? Not one church ever asked me to candidate. Not one. Because I had to say right up there front on a resume, your marital status, single. Who wants a senior pastor who's single? I must admit, there was one church that did ask me to become a candidate. That was a church in the Panama Canal Zone. It's the truth. They wrote me a letter and said, we have a lot of sailors away from home. Would you want to come down and be the pastor? I wrote them back, I don't think the Panama Canal Zone is in my future. Boy, I tell you, that was a bitter experience, I'll admit it. That was the lowest of the low, and I realized I had 2 master's degrees. I had 15 years of experience. I was unqualified because I did not have the MRS degree. So a lot of guys coming out of seminary has tremendous pressure put on them. If they want to succeed in their chosen profession, they got to be married. Is that interesting? Probably the only profession like that. But it has to be qualified. Number 8, budget for single ministry is usually inadequate or non-existent. Many times I've seen it cut in churches. The budget is cut, and many times the churches feel like, well, they're singles and they're adults, they can pay on their own. But the high school can't, the nursery can't. And so if there's ever a cut, it is always the singles that cut first. I have a lot of my friends who are single adult ministers who, what happens is, because of economics, they're no longer strictly singles. Now what's put on their plate is everything else that's needed to be done. And so their job description starts changing. It starts adding on the missions, or adding on small groups, or adding on this, or adding on that. And then what happens is the singles get shortchanged, and the percentage of time that this pastor can even spend time with singles gets less and less and less. And I'll tell you right now, that is a loud, clear statement to the singles themselves. We are not worth anything else. And so they begin to walk with their feet. I'm out of here. I want to be prized. I want to be elevated. It's not here. And so I'm seeing all over America a dwindling of singles ministries. Now, there are a few pockets where some great churches doing great things. But over the majority, I'm finding the singles ministry going downhill. Number 7, churches totally neglect their needs. Totally neglect their needs. Let me give you a picture here. Let's suppose you go to a church. You've been there 5 years. In those 5 years, you've never once heard a sermon directed toward you. In those 5 years, you've never heard an illustration that applies to your life. In those 5 years, there is no more budget for you. In fact, your name or your status is never brought up, except in jokes. That's what's happening in a lot of churches here. They never hear a sermon. They never hear an illustration. Now, one of the things I have learned, and this is just my own observation, I have done over 250 single adult conferences. That's not speaking of various odds and ends of all different things. I mean, just full-blown conferences, around 250. Out of the 250, only 8 senior pastors ever showed up to even greet the crowd. It's in their church. It's in their building. These are adults. Only 8. And I remember every one of the 8 because they're so rare. The last one was in Canada. And it was in the sanctuary, and this fella, he came and he said, I'd love to introduce you. And I said, well, great. I was flabbergasted he came. I said, great, thanks. So he got up there and he said, I just want to thank you all for coming to hear. He had about 300 students, yeah. Mic turned off? Is it on now? Yeah. Oh, good. I must have got, thank you. He said, we're just glad to have you. And he introduced me. And he got down, he was walking out of the church. By the time I got up from my seat and got to the podium, he was halfway down the church. And I said, sir, pastor, just a minute. He was so shocked. He turns around, yes, I want you to come on back up here. I'm sure he did not know what was coming. He came all the way back up on the stage, put my arm. I never met this man before in my life. I don't know how big a name he was. I didn't really care. I just was a buddy of mine here. You know, I put my arm around him. I said, sir, I want these people to know that I appreciate your heart and your attitude. That you take out a few minutes from your busy schedule just to come and greet us. And then I turned to the whole crowd. I said, men and women, this pastor has a heart for you. They gave him a standing ovation. Do you think that guy walked out happy? You betcha he did. Because he at least came to say, I'm interested. Now I know a pastor has gazillions of things he could go to. You got to pick your battles. Now with your kids, you got to pick your spots too. I think I have a lot of other stuff on here, but in my notes. But if a pastor would just pick a few strategic spots, just to show up, just to say hello, you'll be amazed how singles will respond to that kind of thing. Number 6, there is a perception that single adults are morally loose. There's a perception that single adults are morally loose. They are not. It's not. Are you not innocent until proven guilty? It's you're guilty. Now prove that you're innocent. I'll give you a major example. My church was going to hire a high school student minister. There it is, student minister. And they couldn't find him for over a year. So they had a congregational meeting because everybody's saying, how come it's not a youth director or that kind of thing. So they had a congregation just to let people know they're looking, right? Well, I went to this thing. One of my daughters is in the youth group. And we're sitting there, and they gave us all these reasons, on. So I raised my hand. Paula pulled my shirt down. She said, don't get up, Dick. I said, I'm sorry. I'm going to do this. You know, wives are. Anyway, I said, sir, I want to ask you a question. This is to the chief elder who's doing this whole thing. Does this person have to be married? You could hear a pin drop on the carpet. A couple of people gasped. It was the unthinkable question. He hemmed and he hawed. All I want is a yes or no. But he beat her. Well, I mean, we need somebody. And finally, some lady in the very back says, well, what we need is we need a role model for the girls. I said, you mean to tell me in this entire congregation, there's no woman in this entire congregation that's a role model for the girls in the high school? Boy, that shut him up. I hate to say it. I wasn't a very popular guy after this meeting was over. You know, I said, I'll tell you what I think the real reason is you're afraid they're going to fall into immorality. And I just want to let you all know, all the pastors I have known, I've had 4 fall into immorality. I've been a member of the church when they've fallen into immorality. Maybe that's the reason why, because I'm in the church. But anyway, I said, of all the pastors I have known, of all the pastors that I have read about, every single one of them who fell into immorality were married. Now, let's face it, married people do not have a corner on the market of falling into immorality. So do single adults. But you can't prejudice the single adult by saying, because you're single, therefore you're immoral. I'll give you another one. My ministry is called Single Life Resources. I have a website for Single Life Resources. And we were looking at one of these filtering companies that would filter out the junk. And I have 2 teenagers. So I thought, well, I'll look into it. And I gave you a trial run of this particular type of a filter. And so we put it on, and we filtered. You know what? I couldn't even get on my computer, my ministry, because it had the word single in it. It acts out all single stuff. Because singles are all immoral. Well, if you had that kind of attitude, they're unqualified to be a pastor because they're immoral. They can't be around high school kids because they'll probably cavort around with them. I mean, singles get the picture real fast. We have to look at them as people who have a walk with God. Yes, some of them will be immoral. Some of them, if they become Christians, are born in the gutter. Just like married people are born in the gutter. They have to learn. So you don't prejudice by saying we're going to axe out that whole group because they're single and they're on the prowl looking for somebody to mess around with. See, those attitudes come across loud and clear, a lack of trust. Number 5. Marriage is portrayed as normal for everybody. Marriage is portrayed as normal. I've heard a lot of sermons I've heard pastors say these things. Well, if you have the desire, then God's meant for you to get married. Jeez. I had desire in my 20s, my 30s, into my 40s. God wasn't bringing anybody by. I know people who are single, who are into their 60s, who still want to get married. God just hasn't brought someone by. I am not sovereign God. I don't know why a lot of things happen. But I don't think the proof of my call is my feelings. Along with that, is that somehow or other, I think a lot of married people think that if somehow or other you're not married, there's something wrong with you. You're just not normal. In essence, you have a disease that you need to get rid of. I have felt that way. I have heard people say from the pulpit when they go through Genesis, it's the thing that God has a plan for everybody, except for eunuchs in the Bible. God has a plan for everybody to get married. I mean, some of these things are so ludicrous. That means Jesus Christ had a problem. Number 4, the emphasis on quote-unquote family church really means couples and kids. Emphasis on family church really means couples and kids. Now, I am all for a family church. But as far as I can see, it's the family of God church, not the family of married people church. I'll give you an example. There's a Baptist church. I'm not against Baptists. It happens to be a Baptist church. But it's closer to my house than the church I'm going to now. And they asked me to do a Valentine's banquet, and I did the Valentine's banquet. And I thought, oh, these nice people, I ought to go by their church. So the next Sunday, I went to their church. Never been there before. It's on the opposite direction. I'll never go that direction. You know, you have your normal patterns when you leave your house. Well, this is my opposite direction where I usually go. And so I'm coming along the road, and I turn into their parking lot. And about 10 feet into the parking lot, big sign facing the main street. Big sign. It says 1997. This is the year. 1997, the year of the family. Now, I am sure people thought that's a very noble thing. That's a wonderful thing. But what that says, reading between the lines, singles unwanted. Singles unwanted. See, a lot of times things are done when you have a committee of all married people who are making all these decisions. Well, the singles are like this. Well, they're not like that at all. I am sure if I ever told that pastor that he was saying by that sign, you can't stand singles, I'm sure he would think I'm a jerk. We love singles here. But I'll tell you right now, there aren't any singles. The high school students had to be there because mom and dad dragged them. And then college started going downhill. I'm sure the abyss is between college, graduation, and when you have your first kid. That's the abyss. And number 3, all singles are lumped into the same category. All singles are lumped in the same category. I would tell you right now, single adults are not a homogeneous group. What does a 26-year-old never married guy have in common with a woman who is 68 years old, 3 times divorced, and has 14 grandkids? There's no commonality apart from their marital status. So what is interesting is that married people are very homogeneous. All the young newly marrieds have things in common. All those that have, little kids in common, they have the same needs. I mean, you go through all the quote-unquote stages of a marriage life, and you get other people who are on the same wavelength. Yeah, that's right. And so you can have a program that would appeal to, say, a young married without children, and all the young marrieds without children would come. But if you have something for singles, what a mixed mash of people that will show up. So what it means is, and this is the hard part, is church is going to have to rethink how are we going to meet the needs of people, all people, including singles. You can't take the marriage paradigm of a typical church and just put it over into the singles. I like to refer to singles as the barnacle on the ship. The ship is the married part. They're going to go in the barnacle. Now you think I'm against marriage, don't you? Isn't it amazing? I do marriage conferences all over America. I'm on the Family Life Marriage Conference speakers team. This past weekend, I just did a conference in Kansas City for 1,400 married people. So I'm not against marriage. I just want to give you the stuff how singles think so that you could begin to know how are we going to approach almost half of all single adults who are now unaffected by the church, turned off. According to statistics that I've read, the average single goes to church 6 times a year. That's the average. Imagine the millions that never darken the door. How are we going to reach those? Well, number 2 is divorce and the divorcee are considered rejects. Divorce and the divorcee are considered rejects. Now, I believe it's a great sin to get divorced. I am for committed marriages, but reality strikes and there are a lot of divorces. By the way, divorce is not the greatest sin. Even immorality and adultery is not the greatest sin. The greatest sin is rejecting Jesus Christ. So how do we deal with this? And what this does for a lot of churches, it calls into question the very heart of their theology. Definition of elder. What does it mean to bring into your congregation people who have had grave difficulties? Well, all of us have had grave difficulties. Every one of us is learning how to do this. And then number 1, and this is the capstone. I have read a survey on this one. They have surveyed over 3,000 single adults, and they said the number one problem that singles have with the church is that they feel left out. There's a lot of things. Oh, we're going to have a couples meeting. Here's the kicker. We're now going to have dinners of 8. Oh, dinners of 8. Now let's see, that's divisible by 2, which means I have to bring another single with me, doesn't it? Well, singles don't think that way. I'll give you another one, even in finances. I was in one church where my pastor, one of the ones who fell in immorality, maybe this affected his financial, his programs, I don't know. But they had a big financial deal to, going to build a church. And so they had a big board up there about, the results of the giving program, and big, huge letters, giving by family units. That's what was up there. Giving by family units. So I walk over to him afterward. I said, giving by family units, that means you don't want singles to give any money. He says, no, I want them to give money. But where do they fit in family units? All the singles consider themselves a family. I said, right. Where? I said, by that statement, you're saying we don't want your money. Now, I'll be honest. I think single adults are the kind of people that could take up a challenge. You know what? They have the greatest amount of discretionary income of any group in America. They have time, they have education, they have experience. They got a lot of friends who have money too. The problem is they're not challenged. You're going to give where you are challenged. You're going to give where your needs are being met. You're going to give where you feel honored and respected. That's why they don't give. So I want number 3, Roman number 3. I got to move on fast here. It's what I call breaking the glass wall around your church. Do you know there's an invisible glass wall around your church? That invisible glass wall is attitudes that people have. And I want to just deal with 2. These are just very general, and I'm going to get to a lot of specific stuff right after this. Letter A, emphasize the family of God church, which is inclusive of all people. There's a lot of thinking that needs to be done about how to reach and attract singles. This is why churches need singles on their boards. This is why churches need singles to give good input, that they can be part of all aspects. I know churches that don't want singles as Sunday school teachers because they're afraid they just may get immorally involved. You can't have singles teaching little kids in nursery. I mean, singles have a negative attitude before they even begin. And yet, if you want to look at a typical church, when you send out mission teams, the vast majority are single because they have the time. And they have the funds and the friends who can finance them. They have time to be singles. They have time to work in the church. They have time to work on the parking lot. I mean, if you begin to get the heartbeat of single adults, they're going to flock because there's nobody else in the whole city that's competing with you for the singles. You start building a family of God church, and pretty soon the news is going to filter out. It may take a couple of months or 6 months or a year, but if you are dealing with an attitude, everybody is part of this, and we can appeal all different groups, and you have things where singles can feel good at home, and they're attracted, and you speak on some of their topics, it's going to get around. Believe me, they have a network of people all over the city. And then letter B is motivate people to in-reach and outreach. In-reach and outreach. Now I know this is pretty standard fare for for church growth and all that sort of thing. I was in a church growth seminar taught by a very popular and famous man. If I gave his name, you'd all know his books. I sat through a whole day-long seminar on church growth, on how to grow your church. Never once in the entire day did he even bring up the word single. I have tried to get an appointment with this man. I've been in this city 4 times now, and I've tried to get an appointment with him to sit down and talk to him, and I never could. He cancels at the last minute. He doesn't know me from anybody. I guess I'm a nothing to him, and so he hobnobs with all the big wigs all over the country. But I've been trying to get to this man. If I could just say, sir, can I open up your eyes a little bit to almost half of the adult population in these cities? You want a church to grow? Can I give you some ideas? But he's never met with me. Anyway, so those are the main things. Is starting to break the wall. One other thing. Singles, like anybody else, are desperate for relationships. It's a normal thing, but in our culture, we have become so used to control. It's one of the major new shifts in our culture. Control. We are now controlling our computer. We are controlling the input of data. We are controlling our getting on the internet. We are controlling in our technologies. We can push a button and we get out certain results. But when it comes to a human being, you can't push a button and get out certain results. And what happens is the fear factor gets in there. They feel very comfortable in front of their computer, but they don't know what to do with an individual because you can't program like you do a computer. They're not taught, and I have said this to singles groups. They've all said yeah, but they don't like to hear it. What they need is reparenting, because a lot of them never had any parents to teach them. How do you budget? How do you do simple things? Here they are, top-notch salesmen, principals in schools, but they don't know how to get along with someone of their own age. Oh, yes, they can work with kids under them because it's not a threat. They can work with people over them like their boss because it's not a threat. But have a principal of a school have to relate to a person of the opposite sex who is of equal status. Whoa, what do you do then? And all the books on dating are all for teenagers. You go in a typical bookstore, what do you find? Huge section on marriage, huge section on parenting, huge section on youth. Yeah, there is no section for singles. There's a big, huge bookstore near me, and I have gone in there, and I have looked for the section on single adults. It's one little tiny section, and there are hardly any books. You know, my guess is they have somehow sold out of them and they don't want to replenish it. I've gone into Borders. You try this in your hometown. I've gone into Barnes & Noble and Borders. I walked up to one of the employees. I did this in Barnes & Noble just to kind of see. I said, sir, where's the section on singles? He says, what? I said, the section on single adults. I don't know. I said, well, how long have you been working here? He said, I've been working here about a year. And then they said, in a year you haven't found the section? I don't think we have one. So we do have a section. It's all on gay and lesbians. I said, I'd like one that would help a single adult learn how to develop a relationship with someone of the opposite sex. Oh, we got a marriage section. Yeah, we got a marriage section over there. I mean, huge section. I had to go through hundreds of books on marriage to find one book that might deal with a single adult. So singles don't go to bookstores. And then the publishers say, look, singles don't go to the bookstores. They're not interested in books. So they don't publish books for singles. It's a catch-22. So I'm saying the Church of Christ could become the beacon light for thousands of people. One last thing, and I'm going to go on all the positive stuff. There's a book out. I don't particularly want to name it, put it on the tape, but it's a very popular book for single adults. I don't like its moral stand whatsoever, but it's a famous author and a famous book. They had a little ad in the newspaper one day. A representative from the guy who wrote the book is going to be in Barnes & Noble on a certain Friday night. And they're just going to have like a little show on the book. I said, hey, Paula, let's go there. Well, probably only married people might come. You know, maybe 2 or 3 might come. But I'm interested in what this guy has to say. It wasn't the author. It was the representative. I went to Barnes & Noble on that Friday night. Do you know what they had to do? They had to widen the side aisle, took out all the books in the middle, put in these chairs. Hundreds of singles showed up. It was standing room only. They were standing in the stacks all over the place. And this guy did nothing. He just stood up there and he showed a little video of this guy, very inflammatory about sex on the first date and all this sort of stuff. I mean, very inflammatory stuff. And then he said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And he passed out various names. You know, for men there was one name, it was a male's name, and then for women there was a female's name, famous people, you know, from the past, like George and Martha Washington, that kind of thing. He says, okay, now, and he put it on your back type of thing. So now go find your, the one that goes with you. So George was looking for Martha. And I tell you, that thing went on for hours. People going up, all kinds of strange, oh, hi, you, what's on your back, All singles want to do is meet people. And I thought to myself, this is the modern day bar scene. They're tired of the bar. They'll come to a bookstore on a Friday night by the hundreds just to hear some guy say something about a book because they're desperate to know about each other. If the church begins to understand how to hit the heart of single adults, they will flock because you have no competition. Well, let me go through the positive things. and then we'll open for questions. Signs that your church is becoming single-friendly. Signs that the church is becoming single-friendly. Without spending $1. Hey, I put that in there because I thought pastors would love this. No bucks to be spent. Hey, we got this right here. Number one, the church leadership actively looks for mature single adults to become elders, deacons, teachers, and small group leaders. Make it a part of your process is to actively look for single adults. They are out there. Number two, an annual single adults day is instituted, like Mother's Day, Father's Day, Children's Day, Secretary's Day, every other kind of day. Here you are, a single adult. They trumpet mothers. I'm all for mothers. My wife is a mother. I was under a mother, my mother. It's Father's Day, Kids' Day, silence after that. Leaves out everybody else. Number three, the pastor preaches on 1 Corinthians 7 without skipping over verse 7. Quote, Paul said, I wish that all men were even as I am, that is, single. Boy, I tell you, they skip over that verse so fast. It's like it doesn't exist. You ever decide that you'd like to have a pair of scissors and just cut out some stuff in the Bible? You know, it just didn't fit with the flow of things. That's one of them. Number four, the youth group volunteers to babysit for the children of single parents so they can enjoy a night out. I'll tell you, you will win the heart of every single parent in that whole church. Number five, the senior pastor receives questions from single adults and addresses those concerns at a meeting. Now, I have the top 20 questions. Would you pass out that green sheet? I decided I'm going to make your job easier. So I went into my files and I randomly picked out questions that single adults have asked me. Now, I divide them into male and female. When I do a conference, I pass out 3x5 cards. The very last thing on the conference is I'll answer these cards. And during the conference, I'll say, you can ask me any question you have about the opposite sex. It's always, whoa, you know, like that? And I said, I don't want your name and address. All I want is male or female. In the upper right-hand corner, just put M or F for male or female. Of course, one person in one of my conferences put in the upper right-hand corner of their card M or F. So I guess they couldn't decide which one they were. Almost everybody put male or female because I'm always interested in the different questions that men ask than women ask, and they are vastly different. And so I've written down the top 10 and the top 10 from the women and 10 from the men. Now, this is scratching the surface. I have thousands and thousands of questions. And what I try to do is I get up there, when my wife Paula comes, this is a kick. I get my wife Paula up there. And I say, honey, because they hear me all the time. I say, honey, we worked this out. Read the question, so she reads it. And if she wants to answer it, she'll just start talking about it. But if she wants me to answer it, all she has to say is, hey, Dick, what do you think about this one? So we got a little signal between us, you know? So I want them to hear her. And man, she just talks about some of these issues, some of the questions women ask. I'll tell you, the number one question women ask me all over America is, can I initiate a relationship with a man? That is by far number one. Because they want to know. They're aggressive in their business. They're executives in their corporation. They're top salespeople. And they're used to being aggressive. They're used to having men who are now working for them. They're used to competing head-to-head with a man. But when a woman gets into a relationship with a man, the price tags are changed. And they can't understand why they blow these guys out. See, I think women have the hardest job in the world. Because they got to be competitive and competent in their business. And then they have to be soft and gentle and kind in a relationship. That's quite a switch. And to do that within 24 hours over and over again. So I think churches need to help women to learn. I got so much stuff. on how to help a church in the area of dealing with this issue. You know what the biggest syndrome I find in America? In relationships, you have a strong woman and a weak man. That is signs for disaster. I'm not against strong women. My mother was strong. She was a leader type. She was in the PTA. She was everything in the local school. She was president, vice president, everything. She went on to the county, and she held every major office in the county of New Jersey. And then she went to the state. She was down in Trenton all the time, held every major office. The only office my mother did not hold was president. One day when I was in college, I said, "Mom, how come you weren't president of the state PTA?" She said, "Dick, I just didn't have time." It's the only office she didn't hold. At the same time, she ran for school board. Up until that time, no woman had ever sat on the school board in our city. That's true. No woman had ever been on there. But my mom says, "We got to do something for her kids." See, she had 3 boys. There were a lot of problems. She had 3 boys. And so my dad egged her on. My dad was a quiet, unassuming doctor, man of great integrity. But my father never led anything. I've never known my father, and I look back in the records. He never was a leader of anything. He was just a wonderful, quiet, good man. My mom, she was all over the place. Leader, And so my father keep egging my mom on. Go for it, Ann. Go for it. And I discovered from that home that it's not a matter of personality. It is a matter of spirit. That's why the Bible says women are to have a gentle spirit. So anyway, I think we did. Number 6, an elder is given the opportunity to shepherd the single adults. I think that's cool. If you could find an elder in your church that has a heart for singles, and just free them up to just to be the mentor, be the shepherd of the singles. I got to tell you about this one. It's not in my notes. I'm living here in San Diego. There was a church that I've been to quite a few times speaking. There was an old plumber, and they were grandparents, and their kids were out and were gone, and the kids and the grandkids weren't around. They just he and his wife just wanted to have some people over, and they didn't invite people over, just didn't seem to come. And so they just invited a couple of single adults to come over on Sunday for noontime for noon lunch. And the woman put on the big spread, and she loved to do it. She's a big family lady, she liked that. Well, the singles loved that, and so they said, well, we ought to do this again. And so over a period of time, they were getting singles coming into their house, just this old plumber. And pretty soon they had 25 or 30 people coming to their, lunch on Sunday. Because I'll tell you right now, the hardest meal of the week, all the years I was single, is Sunday lunch. Because that's family time in my home. And so this guy started, and so the church said, "Boy, I'd like you to work more with the singles." And he said, "Well, I'm a plumber." And they said, "Well, no, come on over. Tell you what, how about a quarter of the time? We'll pay you what you would ordinarily get as a plumber a quarter of the time. You're a plumber 3/4 of the time, and you work with our singles for a quarter of the time." He said, "Well, okay." And so he and his wife did that, and the singles started flocking. He had a little Sunday school class, turned out to be 100, 200, 300 singles started coming. And then they eventually worked him up to full-time. It's amazing. Gave up his plumbing, became a full-time single adult minister, and the place was packed with singles. Now, I got to put an addendum on that. The church made a stupid mistake. And that is, and I was there the Sunday, I was speaking Sunday, he announced this. The church decided over a period of time, they wanted to upgrade all of their pastors. So they made a decision, all pastors had to have a seminary degree. Which meant, i.e., he was fired. I was there the morning he announced to these 250 single adults that he was leaving. I tell you, there was not a dry eye in the place. I was crying listening to this guy. But what a man of integrity. He said to this whole crew, he said, I'm not going to be able to be around. I'm going to have to leave this ministry. He says, another church has found out about it and then invited me to come and to be their singles minister. And he looked around, he pointed his finger. He said, I don't want any of you showing up in my new church. This is your church home. I stood up and gave that man a kiss. I thought, wow, what integrity that man had to do that when he could have badmouthed the church, but he didn't. See, sometimes God gives a heart to people to just reach out. Maybe you can find an elder like that. Someone just pray. Number 7, jokes about single adults not being married are discouraged. You know, if you hear somebody make a joke, and why don't you pull them aside? Hey, do you really know what that joke means? Yeah, I'm just joking. You know, why don't they get married? Are they gay? You know, okay, well, wait a minute. Let's just talk about this and try to help. I'm not saying you can't go around, don't joke, don't joke. I mean, just pick them off a little bit at a time. Give them awareness. Number 8, sermon illustrations are given to apply to single adults. When you talk about resolving conflict, it's okay to talk about resolving conflict between your wife or you and your wife or you and your husband, but why don't you say, how about you and your roommate? It's a simple deal. Same principles. Here's another one. Mother's Day. That's one of the 3 hardest times for single adults. There's Christmas, Valentine's, and Mother's Day. Because they're high and holy days for romance and families. And I know, actually, if you look at all the statistics about psychology and depression, more people get depressed at Christmas time than any other time during the year. Because they don't have the family that everybody talks about and sings about. But Mother's Day. When you speak to Mother's Day and you say, we're going to honor moms, we got roses. You know what that says? All women in this church who don't have babies are not honored. Now, I love Mother's Day, and I'm glad my wife gets a rose. If you want to do this, you can help your pastor preface the remarks by saying this to the whole congregation. Today is Mother's Day, and we are going to honor mothers. But I know that there are women in this audience that do not have children. You're not married. And I just want to let you know something, that God loves you. Just because you don't have a child doesn't mean that you're lower than anybody else. In fact, there are many places in the Bible where there are single people in the Bible. And I have another thing about who they are. But anyway, there's single people in the Bible. And God loves you too. And by the way, there are married people in this group, married women in this group, who would love to have a child, but you can't biologically. And when we honor the mothers, you're dying inside. I just want to let you know God loves you too. There's Hannah, there's Sarah, many other women in the Bible that have such struggles in this area. You know what? You do something simple like that, you will win the day. With singles in the audience and also the married women who don't have children. Simple little things you can do. Number 9, married couples invite single adults to their homes for Sunday lunch. I've already kind of talked about that. Number 10, a list of ministry opportunities that single adults especially could fill is published. Why don't you, put it on a piece of paper and say, here are the job opportunities in our church. Not to say these are for singles, but they could be single-friendly. Mission trips, going to the elderly home, helping out with various activities with the youth, small groups. Brings things up single adults can do. Number 11, Sunday school topics are presented that attract single adults. I have gazillions of these. If you want to get on my website is dickpurnell.com, and we have all kinds of books and materials on there, but just go through there, look at the books that I have on there, not just mine, I have about 40, 50 different authors. Pick out some of these titles or some of the descriptions, and you'll find all kinds of topics. On there I have one full section on topics that I speak on. I have all my conferences, that's one. But there's another one that has topics I will speak on. There's about 50 different topics I'll speak on. Just go through there, pick out any one you want, and say, hey, here's a good topic. I think that'll be great. Do it for Sunday school. Plagiarize. It's on the internet. It's there to plagiarize anyway. I'll just run off a few of them. Financial planning, big one. Single parent issues, adult dating. Whoa, look at them out of the woodwork. Sex and the single adult. Resolving conflict. Meeting and dating. There's a great controversy in church today. The dating syndrome in relationship to the courtship syndrome. You want a panel discussion that'll just blast out the walls with singles? You have a panel discussion on dating versus courtship. And be up on it, know what they're both talking about. It is worth it. There are Christians on both sides of the fence. You ought to try that. Short-term missions. Boy, I tell you, we should challenge these singles to have short-term missions. Take a 2-week vacation. By the way, the first one you go on, if you go on, needs to be a week. Well, it has to be 2 weeks or less. Preferably about 10 or 11 days, because that gives them a couple days to get ready to go and a couple days to deprogram when they come back before they got to go back to work. But you got to do it a year ahead so they can plan with their boss as when they can get off. Number 12, pastor gives sermons on building a marriage before you get married. A lot of churches err when they say we're going to have a premarital session. What it means is if you're already engaged, what are you going to do to get married? I want to let you know something. By the time they're engaged, they're lost. You can't reason with them. You ever reason with an engaged person saying, I don't think that boy or that girl is for you? I mean, it's like you just put on a red suit with a tail and a pitchfork. What you need to do is, how do you build a relationship? I have a book called Becoming a Friend and Lover. Get some of those ideas. How do you build a friend of the opposite sex? In the social, emotional, mental, spiritual, physical areas. Number 13, single adults in the Bible are highlighted. Now, I had this in my notes. I couldn't get it on your paper. I'm going to go real fast. I'm going to give you the sum of the single adults in the Bible. Okay, you ready to write this down? Absalom. Absalom is the rebellious single. Anna is the elderly widow. Daniel, the single politician. You know, in all his books, never once said anything about his family or kids. I think he's single. Ethiopian eunuch. He's a bachelor by choice. He was castrated. He's a bachelor by choice. Eunuchs, it's a great study. These are singles by commitment. They're eunuchs to the kingdom of God. And by the way, don't give a bad attitude about eunuchs. I hear a lot of people that kind of snicker about that thing. Do you know these are men that decided because they loved God so much, they're going to castrate themselves so that they can serve God only. Raise them up. Elevate them. The Bible never puts them down. Hagar. She's the abandoned single parent. Isaac. Single until he's 40 years old. I just read that the other day in the Bible. I go, whoa, I never knew Isaac was a single adult for that long. Jeremiah. I call him powerful single. Jesus. The ultimate single. You can't get better than that one. John Mark. He's the young single. Went on that trip with Paul and Barnabas. Then later with Barnabas. Joseph. The single prisoner. Did you know he was not married till he got out of prison? He was in prison single. I think that added to some of the difficulties that he faced. Lazarus. The friendly single. He was a friend of Jesus. Martha, the hardworking single. Mary, the socialite single. You know, she liked to socialize. That's great. Moses, single until he's 40 years old. Naomi, the angry widow. Boy, she was angry and uptight. Paul, the model single. Ruth, the industrious widow. Boy, she really was, too. Tamar, the sexually abused single. By the way, there are 2 Tamars in the Bible. Both have sexual problems. You ought to just look at Tamar 1 and Tamar 2. Widows. These are singles by circumstances. Did you know the Word of God says a lot about widows? Isn't it interesting? The Bible points out widows and orphans, cover to cover. These are single people. Well, then, number 14, I'm going to go fast, the rest of these. Brainstorming sessions produce good ideas and activities that attract singles. Get some people together, married and single. How can we do this? 15, start a surrogate parent program for kids of single parents. I'm going to tell you this. This is really a heartache of mine, but I have seen this. One of the greatest things you could do for single parents is to help a single woman know how to raise a boy. They don't know. And how a single father can raise a little girl. They don't know. It kills me. I'm a father. I have 2 daughters. I didn't plan this. I didn't put in my schedule. I want 2 daughters, just the way God did it. I'm at fault. It's me. But anyway, 2 daughters. But all the stuff is father, son, and mother-daughter dinners. That leaves me out. There's nothing for father-daughters. Well, you can imagine the singles who are in that category. Oh, I got a lot of stuff I can say about that. You can talk to me afterward. I'm out of time here. Number 16. The music minister tells stories of single adult hymn writers. There are a lot of them. One of my favorite, and I looked and I could not find the guy's name. He wrote the song, "Oh Love That Will Not Let Me Go." What a story that guy had. He was engaged to this woman in England way back in 1800s. Found out he had an eye disease. He was going blind with no hope. He got on a bus, went over to the other side of London to tell his fiancée. They were already engaged, and to say, I am going to go blind. It looks like I'll never really recover from this, and I'm just going to give you a way out. I know we're engaged, but this is news. I love you very much, and I want to marry you, but I'm going to give you a way out if you want to get out of our marriage, our potential marriage. She chose to go out. She says, I don't want to marry a blind man. He gets on the bus, and on the way back, he's crying, and he begins to write this song, "Oh love, that will not let me go. I rest my weary soul in you." That song carried me through many, many lonely nights, believe me. I'd sing that song. I'd cry that song. I'd read the words. I'd cry those words. That God is the love that would not let me go. I have nobody here. I have no potential. But that's what helped me. There are a lot of them like that. Number 17, great effort is made to integrate single adults into all aspects of the church. There's no sign that says singles unwelcome here. All aspects. And then number 18, the church officially sponsors a single adult conference. I mean, they'll come out of the woodwork. I see this all over America. The churches get behind the singles, and man, there's nothing like it. And they come out. Now, one last thing. End this up. One thing that will cost you money. I am sorry. One thing will cost you money that will bring great returns. Increase your annual budget for singles ministries to the level of high school or college ministry. It will be an investment in the lives of people who can give back far more in leadership, missions, evangelism, prayer, time, and finances. Well, I'm out of time. But give you some ideas. You can tell I've been thinking about this for years. You see all the stuff I left out. But I appreciate your hanging in there with me. And it looks like we have about, 5 or 8 minutes. Do we have any questions that you'd like to ask? Yeah.
On the surrogate parenting, would you try to find another single person, or do you let a married dad help a single mom?
Yeah, on a single parent. There's a lot of questions about that on surrogate parents. I have a tendency to think it's better to do it in groups for right now. See, one of the major problems with marrieds working with singles is the opposite sex married person is jealous or fearful. If the man works with a woman, the wife is fearful. If the wife works with a man, the husband is fearful. I mean, a lot of fear. Fear is what divides our church. So maybe you may want to start like a big brother, big sister thing, only it's a man with the kids. I have known single men who have gotten involved in a surrogate parent. Take, all the little girls and kind of go out to a playground. Now, if you want to supervise it for insurance purposes or whatever else, you can do that. But I think that'd be great. Start with groups, so there's no fuzzy feelings and people thinking, oh, what are they doing? Just do it in groups. Get a bunch of women to take out, little girls from a single father and say, hey, well, let's go out And maybe reparent them. You know what I think reparenting is? Like teaching little girls how to bake cookies. Do you know they're never taught? But when I did a youth program, and I put out a pile of store-bought cookies and a pile of homemade cookies, which went first? It was the homemade cookies. So in the process, what you do, you teach little girls on how to bake cookies, you bring it to the youth and show these little girls they can have a ministry by baking cookies. You know, little things like that could just win the day with not only youth, but with the single parents involved in the church. Guys, you know a good thing for guys is? Teach a little kid how to change oil in the car. People don't know. We just drive in the Jiffy Lube. That's it. They don't know how to change the oil, but kids love to tinker. Little boys do. Anything, any mechanical stuff. You might get a bunch of boys together on a fun night, you know, little boys from single parent, and just give them puzzles, you know, like these two nails that are intertwined and how to overcome those. Get a bunch of those kids. Little boys love to tinker and to mess around with things. But parents, see, women do not know how to raise a little boy, so he starts tinkering all this sort of stuff. It looks like he's damaging stuff. Well, don't do that. And by the way, oh man, I got so much in this. If you look at a typical school scene, elementary school is full of women. Middle school is full of women. You have a token male, every so often, all women. So by the time the little boy gets to high school, he has been inundated by female thinking for all those years. And little boys just don't act like little girls. But they have female attitudes put on them. How can a little boy be a little boy? And I think the more you can do to help women to know how to handle boys, it's great. Got about 2 more minutes. Any other? Yeah.
I know you've worked with singles for quite a few years, and so the day the rest of your thing is coming to play even more so.
Uh-huh.
Most singles choose to live by themselves rather than roommates for fear of having some kind of stigma put on them, and as a result, there's more loneliness because they don't even have somebody to share how their day was.
Okay, I have to repeat this for the tape. So the question is, are singles choosing more to live alone because of stigma? I think singles are living alone because of economics. I mean, they can handle it. There's a lot more, and having a roommate just messes things up, and I'd rather live by myself. That's the major reason why they're living alone. I really would advocate singles to have roommates, because what happens is the more they live alone, the more they're going to live alone. You know, and then you get a person of the opposite sex picks up on this, that they're really hard and they have to. I know women that are living alone, and everything in their house has an exact place. I mean, exact place. The flowers are all exactly right. The towels are all exactly right. And the guy goes into this place, he's out of style. He thinks, what is this? Is this a museum? There's not a messy thing anywhere. And women think it's wonderful. It doesn't attract guys. You know, guys love, hey, whatever happens, happens, man. You know, put your feet up on the coffee table or whatever. And so you get into a relationship with a guy where now, you know, a little dirt on the fingers, that's good for you. You know, get out there and get some dirt on your fingers. Women go bazooey. I never knew it for years. I finally picked up on this, that when you go into a person's home and you go in the bathroom and you wash your hands, you don't wipe your hands off on the towel that looks good. I didn't know that. I finally got some people to tell me that that's not what you do. So I didn't know what to do. So it was either on my pants or on the backside of the good towel. So I think sometimes the older the woman is, the more she's set in her ways if she's living by herself. You have to help these women to loosen up, you know, because what attracts each other is fun. What attracts each other is kicking back and having a lot of, good times. But we come across too hardened, and the signs go up, well, yes, they're not wanting somebody. Now, the weird thing about singles is, and I've done surveys, 91% of all singles want to be married. The other 9% are liars. So 91% want to get married, but I'm almost finished, man. But singles are looking, but they don't want to look like they're looking. That is your key. If you can provide programs that it doesn't look like it's a meat market, but it is, they'll love it. You know? But it's learning how to do that. That's where you need feedback and good form type of groups and do a lot of communication between. Anyway, I've had a great time. It's been too short. You're probably saying it's too long, but thanks a lot for coming.
This concludes the message. To order copies of this or other messages given at the conference, please call Audio Mission International at 1-800-874-8730. For additional materials or a catalog on building strong families, call the Council on Biblical Manhood and Womanhood at 847-573-8210, or Family Life Ministries at 800-FL-TODAY. That's 800-358-6329.